You know, my wife Jane and I moved here in 1993. And at that time, there were these massive layoffs at Electric Boat. We kind of scratched our heads and said, did we make a mistake? But boy, what 2 decades will make. Things are really, really on the upswing there. So our next speaker is Tom Plante. He's the Director of Strategic Planning at Electric Boat. He's responsible for the development of the company's annual strategic plan and maintaining a comprehensive analysis of the defense business environment, focusing on the Navy, the Department of Defense, and the Defense Industrial Base. He's a graduate of Rensselaer Polytech Institute with a BS in Mechanical Engineering and a Master's in Computer Science. He spent 4 years in the Navy as a sonar and weapons officer. He joined Electric Boat in 1984 and served in a variety of positions with increasing responsibility. He led proposed development of a third Block 8 Virginia-class submarine, began construction in 2009. So he's well-versed in electric boats. So if you will, Tom.
Okay, thanks a lot, Al. Next few minutes, I'm going to kind of give you a sense of what I see our business doing in the future. We have a very long horizon, a very long cycle time in our in our products. So I'm going to talk about things that are going to happen in the future, and for a lot of folks here, it's way in the future. But that's the nature of our business. So picking up on the theme of every drug kind of goes through Pfizer. Every sailor that's trained for the Navy goes through the sub-base, sub-school. Every submarine that's delivered to the Navy is certified by Electric Boat. So it's another one of our key things here for the region. We have 3 main lines of business. Our mission is really to design, build, deliver, and support Navy submarines. So we have 500 people at the sub-base New London supporting the efforts there to maintain those ships and get those delivered on time. We also do major availabilities that come our way. We compete for those. So we always have to be competitive. We are responsible for the delivery of Virginia-class submarines, and I'm going to go into a lot more detail about that. And then we're also responsible for designing the future submarine force. Okay. Today we have 10,000 people that work in Connecticut, another 3,600 people that work in Rhode Island. There are always residents of Rhode Island that work in Connecticut and residents of Connecticut that work in Rhode Island. So we're pretty interconnected between what happens on the waterfront here in Groton and New London, as well as what happens at Quonset Point, Rhode Island, where we have our main manufacturing center. 500 people support the Navy at different locations throughout the country, and a few more remote areas with trusted allies. So our total head count's about 14,100 people. 64% of our business is building submarines. It takes 5 years to build a Virginia-class submarine, 10 million hours. And the first 4 years of that really occurs at 2 places, Newport News, Virginia, our teammate on building these submarines. It's the only other place in the country that you can do nuclear submarine construction. And then a third of the hours occur at Quonset Point, Rhode Island, and then the last third is the delivering shipyard. And we alternate deliveries with Newport News. Al talked about 1993. We were basically coming off of a 15-ship backlog at the Groton waterfront. And when we started construction of Virginia-class submarines in 1997, there was only 1 ship in backlog. That's what happened in the 90s. So what's changing? What's changing now is we're in the process of designing a new Ohio replacement submarine, a new SSBN. And that's a major demand driver for us and for this region, because what's going to happen is we're going to double our size in the trades, both at Quonset and in the Groton waterfront. So that's going to create a growth opportunity for us, and it's going to be an economic lever in this region, because the jobs we have are very high-tech jobs. They're high-quality jobs, high-salary jobs with world-class benefits, and that kind of spend is going to generate opportunities here when that demand hits us. So this year we're planning on hiring about 1,800 people. 300 people at Quonset, and that's mainly to replace attrition. Workforce, when we had the major recapitalization starting in the 70s and going through the 80s and ending in the 90s, those people are 40-year people now, and they're starting to retire. So we have a need to rejuvenate this workforce, mentor them, teach them how to design and build submarines so we can continue to provide that valuable service to the Navy. In Groton, we have a plan to hire about 600 people, some to replace attrition, about half to replace attrition, retiring folks, but also the other half is to support a major availability that we competed for and won last year, and that's going to be to perform availability on the Montpelier, the 765. So that's going to come in the yard, actually, and we're going to start that availability later this fall, and that's going to take about 500-600 people continuously for about 2 years to do that major availability. Engineering design side, that's another main part of our business, about 30% of our sales. That occurs in 2 places, 3,500 people in New London, and the rest of the folks are generally on the waterfront here in Groton supporting either the delivered ships or the ships in construction. So we got about 5,500 engineers and designers, and we're just about at peak manning on that, supporting the new design efforts, and I'll kind of go into those in a little bit more detail. And then 500 folks or so we plan to hire in the support area of the business. So that's about 1,800 people that we're bringing in. In terms of spending in the region, we basically, an easy way to get your head around it is over the last 5 years, we've spent about $100 million a year in Connecticut. That's just in Connecticut. And we have a pretty much a total country reach in our industrial base. Suppliers in all 50 states, and it's a significant spend. But in Connecticut, it's about $100 million a year, $500 million over the last 5 years. And we're fortunate to have this very specialized industrial base. We'll also be seeing the same kind of growth and demand that we're going to see here delivering ships. Our market is the Navy submarine fleet. That consists of about 54 SSNs, of which the Virginia class is replacing those ships now. There's 4 Ohio-class SSGNs, the guided missile version of that ship. Those were converted from the SSBN service. And then 14 Ohio-class SSBNs, which are deployed to either Kings Bay or Bangor. Those 14 ships are going to be replaced by 12. And we're designing that ship now, mostly out of New London, to begin construction in 2021. So that's kind of the beginning of our horizon. And the Navy puts out a 30-year shipbuilding plan that's expected to be 50 submarines here between Ohio replacements and Virginia over the next 30 years. So that's kind of our market. It's our market for when we recapitalize ships with new designs, and it's our market for maintaining ships that are in the fleet. The Navy has a 30-year plan, and they buy ships every 5 years in blocks. So 2 years ago, there was a lot of fanfare about the contract that we had to build Block 4. It was about a $17 billion contract for 10 submarines. It takes about 10 years to deliver all 10 submarines, and we start construction on 2 submarines every year, okay? So that's kind of the mode we're in. It's kind of a making the donuts kind of mode for the region. We're delivering now at that 2 submarine per year build rate. We're delivering 1 submarine a year out of the Groton footprint. And when Al was talking about the 90s, it was when we started building Virginias, it was delivering 1 submarine every 2 years. So we just doubled demand recently on the Groton waterfront to deliver 1 submarine a year. And then when we start the Ohio replacement deliveries, we're actually going to be delivering a submarine and a half. And if the Navy needs more submarines, we got to be able to deliver potentially 2 submarines a year. So, we're going to basically transform the Groton waterfront. Occurs every other generation to be able to support efficiently the Navy's demand for submarines. In this case, we're going to be going to 2 types of submarines as opposed to 1. Electric Boat was recently named the yard that will be delivering all 12 Ohio replacement submarines, in addition to Virginia-class submarines. So these are major programs. There's a lot of congressional interest. We have a great congressional team, both in Rhode Island and Connecticut, in key roles in the Congress. And every year, you know, it's a dogfight. We take nothing for granted. Last year was, in the major program, $7.4 billion in the budget, of which about 2/3 is kind of the shipyard scope, whether for engineering and design or whether for construction. This year, there's an 8% increase in the president's budget request for 2017. So that's about $8 billion for the major programs at Electric Boat, and consisting of a high replacement Virginia-class submarines and the moored training ships. As far as highlights go, we have 16 ships under contract today in Block 3 and Block 4. Block 1 and 2 have been delivered. We got 11 submarines under construction. There's about 4 to 5 at any given time in the Groton waterfront. The rest is in the early phase of construction, either at Newport News and at Quonset Point. We're about 86% complete on Block 3, but there's 3 deliveries to do from Groton. So we got 3 ships going to come out basically at a 1 per year rate out of the shipyard down here. And then the Block 4, the first Block 4 hardware for those 10 submarines is going to arrive in Groton later this year. So we're going to start working on delivering those ships. At a 2 per year rate, you're basically going to have an event a year that's going to be a christening, an event a year is going to be a keel laying. You're going to have 1 authorized and 1 delivered from Groton and another 1 delivered from Newport News. So it's pretty much a kind of a steady state series demand process we're in. Last fall, we had Michelle Obama as the ship sponsor for the 786. We expect to deliver that submarine later part of the summer, and we're working on getting the next ship, the Colorado, which is in the 260 building, so you can't see that, but that'll roll out in September, and we'll float that off and basically get those ships on their way to the Navy. So it's not too early to tell you what's in the near future. We're going to be actually started working on the Block 5 contract. So 2 years ago, we talked about $17.3 billion contract for 10 Block 4 submarines. We're actually going to be working towards getting ready for the Block 5 contract. It's supposed to be 9 submarines, but this new block of ships is going to have 83 feet more ship to it. It's called the Virginia Payload Module. So where we have the current ship at 377, that will now be 460 feet, and we're going to make some facility modifications to accommodate the longer Virginia-class submarine. So that next block of submarines, it could be 9. The Navy wants 10. If we give them a good price, that may actually be 10 submarines. But that's going to be more than $17 billion. It's about a 15% increase to add this 83 feet of ship to that class design. That's being done to add capability, because those SSGNs that I talked about, those 4 SSGNs, those are going to start coming out of service, and this new configuration of Virginia is going to replace that capability for the Navy. So it's a very significant change and a very important change for the Navy to continue to do what it needs to do to provide national security. That contract for Block 5, we expect to be awarded in the late 2018 timeframe. So we're going to really start working on contracting and the proposal efforts for that the year before. So that's something to watch here in the near term. And as I mentioned, it's going to be a major needle mover for the region. Most of the material spend for a block of submarines occurs even before contract award for some of the equipment we buy, as far as advanced procurement goes. But after contract award, the first 3 years, we're spending most of the money that goes against material for the shipyard, for the ships. So that's kind of the new construction piece. We'll start construction of high replacement in October of 2020. And then the Virginia Block 5, we expect to have under contract and start construction in 2019. As I mentioned, we have this major availability, a very large availability on the Montpelier. That's going to start this fall. And then we have some other availabilities we're finishing up. The Minnesota, we expect to get out hopefully later this month, and the North Dakota in the fall time frame. Illinois and the Colorado, which are currently under construction to be delivered will come back to the yard, and we'll do a post-shakedown or post-delivery availability. It's a 4 or 5 or 6 month availability. And then we have the Nautilus is supposed to come back in the yard. We're going to do a preservation review and a paint job on that and get that back into service. So that's kind of on the maintenance and modernization side, the activities. And then as far as facilities go, as I mentioned, we need to change the footprint a little bit, replace some aged assets. We're going to basically transform our final assembly, test, and launch zone to make some improvements there so we can deliver the bigger Ohio replacement submarines, which are 2.5 times an SSN in terms of size and amount of hours and displacement. Okay, that's a pretty big ship. It's about the same length as an Ohio, 560 feet, which is the height of the Washington Monument. That's going to be on that land level facility down there on our waterfront, and we're going to do one of those a year when we get into the steady state, which is going to be basically towards the latter part of the 2020s. We'll be in that mode. And then while we're delivering those Ohio replacements, we're going to be delivering Virginias at some level, at least half a ship a year or one ship every 2 years. And if the Navy needs more submarines, we got to be able to support that demand increase. So the final assembly, test, and launch zone, which is kind of the north yard of our facility, we'll do some refurbishment up there to make that area suitable to support that increased demand. And again, that represents an opportunity for the businesses in the region to support that. So what do we need to do? What do we need from the community? We need help bringing the next generation designers, engineers, shipbuilders, tradesmen. We got to get them trained. We got to get knowledge transferred to them. They got to basically pick up and take the legacy forward. We've been a company for 115 years now. We've had footprint here for 105 years, and I don't see anything changing in the next 100 years. There's nothing out there, in my view, that's going to change the equation. Physics is physics. It's all about stealth. It's all about presence, and it's all about numbers. So we look forward to working with our community here on putting facilities in place that are going to be world-class for the future generations of submarines, making sure we have resources here that can do the work we need. It's the most complicated work you could ever imagine, designing and making sure those ships operate safely in harm's way. So with that, I'll close.